They get better as they go down, but we're just trying to save them rather than having to get.
All right, man. I think you got Passalora needle blight, because it kind of looks like water stress, which we already discussed. But the way that it's affecting the plants from one side to the other is not typical of water stress. Because like I have some Lelands at my house, and I didn't water them last winter, and they're kind of buried too deep, which I knew when we put them in 5 years ago. But I thought I'd be moved out of the house and it wasn't gonna be my problem, which is probably a horrible thing to do, but it's the truth. But they're kind of cheap trees, at least around here they are, and they grow really fast, and they need a lot of space, and they need a lot of water. And in winters here, it gets really dry. Same thing with summers, and so we'll have damage that looks just like what you have. But I don't think you live here, and I think where you live, the Lelands probably actually do better because they probably get a little bit more natural water. And I think what you have is Passalora needle blight, which resembles the same symptoms as drought stress on Lelands. Where basically it's killing old growth. Like it doesn't affect the new growth until the point where the tree is so dead that the new growth really just can't regrow. And so what should you do about it? Honestly, with trees that big, man, you really need to bring in a professional. If it was me, I would probably quote you to do a trunk injection of a fungicide. Like, what is it? That we're using on our I have a pine in my front yard, and we've been treating it with a trunk injection from ArborJet. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but I think that you need trunk injections. And if I were you, I would do trunk injections on like the next, so like the trees that are infected, and then I would go into the next 2 or 3 healthy trees too, and just go ahead and do trunk injections on like those 5 trees. The trunk injections we were using last for a year. You typically need to do those. I would do it for 3 to 5 years, realistically, and probably 3 years. I'd probably do 3 years, give it a year off, see if the problem comes back. If not, give it another year. If the problem starts to come back, definitely get the trunk injections in again. These injections are probably something you're going to want to have done. They need to happen in like March. So you'll want to make sure you get on somebody's schedule early in the year. Timing is pretty critical on this because you want to get that into the plant during uptake season. So early March is definitely the answer. At least in my area, your uptake season may be slightly different. You know, like you may be a month earlier or a month later, but an expert or an ISA certified arborist who does trunk injections ought to know that. And if I'm you, I'm looking for somebody who's ArborJet certified, so maybe even reaching out to ArborJet, seeing if there's somebody in their area who's a local tree injector who can do trunk injections. It's just not super responsible for the environment to spray fungicides that high in the air and let them blow all around. It would work if I have equipment that could probably actually spray to the tops of those trees and get them completely covered with fungicides. It's just not the way I would do it. It's like I said, it's not environmentally responsible to be spraying around fungicides like that. So but yeah, man, I think unfortunately, well, the good news is I do think it's something that you can probably manage with trunk injections. The bad news is I don't think it's going to be cheap. A lot of those trunk injections are upwards of $300 a tree, and that's kind of a starting point. I know some of the big oaks in St. Louis that I was treating were like $500, $700 for one injection. And most treatment programs require 2 to 3 injections minimum. So I could see this being something that took 3 injections, take a year or 2 off and do 3 more injections. And really, you don't want to take too many years off because the goal is to let the plant grow out of the fungus, right? So let it grow so much that any needles that did have fungal spores on them have shed those fungal spores. Something else you can do to help this tree as it's growing out over the next couple years is raking up all the needles underneath of this tree, which is probably something you're like, screw that. But that's where the fungal spores sit. They sit on those needles. And so anytime you get wind or rain, they can blow or splash back up onto the plant. Even if the plant's completely grown out of the disease, they could come back. But if you rake up and you bag up all those needles and you go ahead and dispose of them somewhere where there's not trees that could be infected, then I think you'll find that after several trunk injections, you get your problem under control, man. I hope that helps you. Sorry I'm so long-winded, but I do think you got Passalora needle blight on your Leland cypresses, and I do think that the prescription is trunk injections. And unfortunately, I think you're going to need a legitimate professional to be able to help you out on saving those things. Even if they don't do trunk injections. You need somebody who can spray to the top of those bad boys and get them really covered well. So hope that helps. Best of luck to you, brother. And if you have any more questions, or if you see something else, or if an arborist comes out and disagrees with my diagnosis, please send me any more updated information or what they tell you and show you, and I'll let you know if I'm wrong. Take care.